This is a cable lifeline video to accompany the Cast On magazine article. Before I begin, I wanted to take a moment first to look at the actual cable and point out some anatomy things that will be helpful for us to be aware of. The cable always presents itself a row below where the cable is actually worked. So in this particular case here, these stitches that are on the needle were the stitches that made the cable crossing. However, you can see that the actual crossing appears below those stitches. It sits below the needle. So always keep in mind that the stitches that were actually performing the cable crossing, the crossing itself will present itself a row below it. Okay, and so here, this you can see I've worked around. So this one here is the same cable. This is all from the Philomena dress. And here I've worked one row even after making the cable crossing row. And I put a little coilless marker into the cable cross row, and you can see a little more clearly here how that cable crossing itself presents itself a row below where it is actually worked. Okay, so how does that pertain to lifelines? So first of all, as in the article, the lifeline is basically an apparatus to help you if you make an error and you need to rip down. And there are choices about when and how to place these things. You can do them proactively, which is fine. In that particular case, what you would do is you would just pick somewhere along in the pattern where you wanted to have these things and place them randomly throughout. And after you had worked the cable, so again, these are the stitches that made the cable crossing, you would go through and just start taking your thread. In this case, I have some dental floss because it doesn't fray or do anything strange. And I'm just going through that front leg of all the stitches. You can see. And sure, I can grab a few at a time if I really want to. But you're basically just putting, no, I can't. You're basically just putting this lifeline through these stitches, and you'll ignore it. So when I come to work this, I will just pretend this doesn't exist and work those stitches even as I would in the pattern, okay? And then if I ever, as I go along, if I find an error, I can rip down and it'll go right to here. And I'll have these stitches, watch, you can see if I pull them off here. Ooh, ooh, they are there, and they have that little string through them so they're not going to go and unravel, okay? So that is definitely an option that you have to do these lifelines. You would want to put it into the actual row where you make the cable crossing, not the row before. Okay, so why is that? If I put this cable lifeline into the row and then I go ahead and work a cable, well, the essence of a cable is that I'm swapping around the order of my stitches. And if I have a lifeline in the row of stitches that I'm swapping, that lifeline is going to start zigzagging back and forth, okay? And so it's going to be near impossible to get out after the fact. So put it in the row where you're working. That does mean then that you'll have to take some DPNs and just ever so carefully undo the work of that row, but it'd just be very challenging to pull them out after. So that's if you're doing them proactively. Okay, so what if I'm doing them reactively? And what do I mean by that? I'm not using these lifelines per se, but then I get to a point and I'm like, oh boy, I made a mistake and I need to fix it, and I'm a little nervous about just taking this cable repeat and just dropping all those down, right? Or some people would even just go and unravel the whole thing, okay? Say you just made a mistake on which direction that you made the cable crossing, okay? So what you can do then is you can reactively go through and place your cable lifeline. And so in this case here, we'll do this because it's right up close, but let's say I had made that cable incorrectly right here. Now, if this were down here, I'd have to pretty much put a lifeline through the whole repeat of the cable, right? Because I'd have to drop it down and I'd be picking up things over here and over there. But I'm going to place this lifeline into the row above the problem cable, okay? And I can do that fairly surgically. So let's say it was this row and we've gone down, and so then what I would do is take up this right leg. Well, I said I'd have to take the whole thing. So I'd take the right leg here, the right leg here. Now obviously this is far up, I would just take it off my needles, but if this were down in the knee of the knitting, right, then I would have to do that whole section, okay? And you can see it's a little more challenging with these travelers because you got to grab, where'd you go? That right leg of the traveler, okay? And you would just proceed in this manner across. And then and you would just go across, grabbing all these, and so on through to the other side of the reverse stockinette stitch. And then you can see you have put this inside those stitches and you could drop it down with no trouble, okay? And so just two different ways of using the lifeline. Again, however you decide to do it is up to you. It is a nice little tool if you're concerned about losing the stitches when you go to rip.